Pittsburgh Steeler fans, it's time once again for another edition of Know Your Enemy. I don't remember what podcast we're on tonight. Geoffrey and I are joking off air, but my name is Michael Beck, your deputy editor behind thesteelcurtain.com, and I'm joined with, as always, one Mr. Geoffrey Benedict. Geoffrey, how you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. That's, that completely un-Steelers related. I'm doing great.
All right, so we'll save that conversation for another time then. For everyone that's watching right now, wondering where our special guest is, James Rapien from the Locked Bengals podcast will join us in the second half of the show today. So we'll break down the Steelers matchup, of course, here in the first half of the show. Before we get to next Sunday's game, though, I do want to ask you one question about the previous Sunday's game. Of course, the Steelers' brutal loss against the Raiders. Geoffrey, what are your thoughts on that game? Is it an overreaction to say we've already started to fallen off the rails? What's the vibe here? How are you feeling?
Has the season gone off the rails? The season is currently off the rails. That's my take on that game. But it's nothing that can't be fixed. It just has to be fixed. There's some things that just have to get better.
Got it. Yeah, no, it's from offensive line to quarterback play to injuries. There's a long list of stuff there. And really, I think we should probably touch on the injuries right now. Of course, when we recorded this podcast a week ago, no one on the Steelers were hurt. They were a completely 100% healthy team. A week later, there's 5 guys who are battling through groin injuries. Tyson Alualu broke his ankle. Ben Roethlisberger nursing a pec. What is going on with this? What the heck happened?
I think they installed a stripper pole at the Steelers training facility. I think Brian Anthony Davis got hired as their trainer. I don't know, man. It's just crazy to see that many groin injuries at once. You're like, what happened? No, my brother-in-law, he was a physical trainer. He works in medical fields. He's like, man, did they swap trainers? Did they get someone stretching them entirely inappropriately, entirely wrongly? Sorry, not inappropriate, but wrongly. What's going on that would cause that I'm off the rails.
Your minds just went straight in the gutter tonight.
I'm good. Next topic.
We'll stay with the injuries though, because it is pretty important. Ben Roethlisberger, he's going to battle through it. It sounds like TJ Watt was limited. Alex Highsmith, I believe, missed the day. Devin Bush was a full. Are injuries going to impact this game? Is this something to be concerned about, or could potentially Ben play that great game he seems to always have when he's playing injured?
I was going to say, I have an anonymous source that says Ben actually had 3 of his arms amputated this week, but he's still going to play. That's the one of the problems with Ben Roethlisberger. You don't know. He could have it could be an injury that he can completely play through, but it's legit injury. Or it could be an injury that is going to absolutely cause him to stink, and he's still going to play through it. It doesn't matter. The guy's going to give it a go, whether he can play or. I mean, they had to pull him off the field when his muscle had completely disconnected from the bone, and he couldn't throw the ball literally at all. And they're like, "You cannot go back out on the field." And he's like, "Really?" That's Ben Roethlisberger. So. I don't know what we're going to see from Ben Roethlisberger. His worst games are always the game before he's out with injury and the game before he returns, because he tries to play through stuff that he shouldn't. But we also have seen him come out injured and play great games. So I don't know. It depends on, is this an injury he can play through effectively, or is this an injury he can survive playing through? Outside of Ben Roethlisberger, the defense. I said this on my podcast, but if you take the top 6 players from the steel curtain and you say we're gonna subtract 4 of them and see how great that defense is, you don't have a great defense anymore. You have a good defense with a couple of great players on it, which is what we had. Well, although I would go step down from good, because this defense isn't as deep as the steel curtain was. But down 4 of their top 6 players, counting Stephon Tuitt, because he's he hasn't played yet, but he's still out. That still counts. He's one of their best players. They're down 4 of their top 6 players. This defense is not going to be a good defense. They're going to be maybe league average.
Wow. Yeah, no, and it does seem like they're trending in the right directions from player personnel-wise, guys getting healthy. We'll see how many people are still out. Hopefully the numbers will be better. Of course, with the Alu heading to the IR, Henry Mondo gets the bump up, and the Steelers signed Taco Charlton. Well, what are kind of your overall Taco? What are your kind of overall vibes with those kind of three moves there? How do you feel about losing Alu for the year, Mondo stepping in, and then of course the acquiring of Taco Charlton?
Alu being lost is rough. That dude was just a rock in the middle of the line. Like, and the fact that you just aren't moving him, he's going to slowly go in whatever direction he wants to go in, and that's pretty much you're just going to have to deal with it. But also, he's a serious veteran and he knows his stuff. He is a very smart player. I'm glad Mondo got called up. I like the dude. He got a lot of action this preseason. I was banking on him because of how much the Steelers played him, but at least we know he is someone who knows the defense and can play a serious rotational part. I would not be surprised to see him get significant snaps. Taco Charlton, the out of him, I like it. I'm a Michigan fan, and I like Taco Charlton, but I thought when he was drafted he was being overrated, and then Dallas took him over TJ Watt, which was insane. But he's a solid guy. I think he can be, better than you're going to get from like an Anthony Chickalo type character. I think he can give us more than that, and just be kind of a solid guy in that rotation. Because I mean, if you look at that list right now, if you look at that injury list, you've got two of your three outside linebackers on there. If both of those went bad, you could end up with Jameer Jones as a starter. Right? That's in the spectrum, especially groin injuries where it can be better one day and worse the next day. Like it varies through the week. You're just gonna have to wait and see for a lot of these guys getting back. And man, if a lot of those names go wrong, if you're seeing a 3-man rotation of Melvin Ingram, Jameer Jones, and Taco Charlton, that's rough.
Yeah, not exactly what we were anticipating to start the year with, but that's what we're looking at right now. To his credit, Jameer Jones, I think, played pretty darn well in that action he got in on Sunday.
He got a quarterback hit.
Yeah, no, it was on
the touchdown. It was on one of Derek Carr's touchdowns, but he got in there, and which actually puts him ahead of Alex Highsmith, who does not yet have a quarterback hit, has not yet touched a quarterback in the season.
That is wild. That's honestly hard to compute that hasn't happened yet. But Jameer Jones, obviously, in my opinion, he's shown more than Chickalo, than Ola Denny, any of these guys. So I'm a big fan of Jameer Jones. I like what he's brought to this team. But looking ahead,
did you see Ola's sack he got in their game?
He did make a play.
That should have been a safety. But anyways, yeah, it was crazy. I'm watching that. I'm like, Ola Adniyi and Bud Dupree are in there making pressures and getting a big sack, and I'm just like, I kind of was cheering for him. I'm like, let's go. I know you're not a Steelers anymore, but let's go, guys. Go represent.
Up here in the Pacific Northwest, it couldn't have been any better for me. In Seattle watching those guys play. But anyhow, looking at the Steelers matchup this Sunday. We will, of course, ask James Rapien in the second half his thoughts on all things Bengals. But what's your kind of your first overall kind of impression of the Bengals as we head into this game, the first AFC North clash for the Steelers this year? What are your just general thoughts on the Bengals and how the Steelers kind of match up with them?
I don't even know this team. Like, they changed half their defensive personnel. There's a whole bunch of brand new players. Their offensive line, they went out and didn't draft Penei Sewell, but and everyone's like, oh, their offensive line is trash, and Joe Burrow killed. And then if you look at pass rush win rate, ESPN's pass rush win rate, pass block win rate, and run block win rate, man, if I could talk, the Bengals are
it's only your job,
way up the list. They're one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. Like, boom, they didn't do anything. They're 7th in pass block win rate this year so far. And I mean, they haven't played anybody, but Chicago has Khalil Mack. You're still facing some talent out there. So I mean, and their receiver core is different. The quarterback, Joe Burrow, you barely saw him last year, and he wasn't really anything yet. But now, I don't know what to expect from this team at all. I really don't, except I hope they still stink. That's right with the Bengals. I'm like, come on, guys. you can still be the Bengals. Don't do that whole "we're not the Bengals anymore" thing.
At least one team Ohio has to suck, right?
Right? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's a constitutional law, and I'm Canadian, so I'm pretty sure that's how that works out. Anywho, so moving along in our programming here, that's the word I'm looking for. What do you think of Mike Hilton? Our first kind of look at him as a Cincinnati Bengal playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is he someone that's going to kind of dominate the Steelers, or can the Steelers find a way to dominate him?
That's going to be an interesting thing. Because we were all like, are they going to use him right at all? So I had to go look up the numbers. He's actually been blitzing. You're using him as a blitz. He's got a couple tackles for loss, a couple pressures, hasn't gotten a sack or a QB hit yet. But he was on someone was interviewing. He was talking about he's looking forward to trying to hit Big Ben. He's like, and he even brought up, it was kind of one of those moments where he's like, I've never gotten to hit him. Like, we're not allowed to hit Ben. You have to like kind of touch him. He's like, I'm looking forward to actually like laying a good one on him and trying to tackle him. So I'm excited. I have a problem not liking Mike Hilton. I can't really do that yet. So if he comes in and really starts playing well against us, that could change very quickly.
You know what's sad?
Stop.
One of the things that's sad, like now that the Steelers have all this extra money and they totally could have kept Mike Hilton now, like looking at the books, that play against the Raiders when Henry Ruggs had his 60 whatever yard touchdown, Trey Norwood kind of like struggled his way through a blitz. Oh, if that was Mike Hilton, that play was me in the backfield. That's a sack, and we're still in that game.
It's a tenth of a second difference between a 61-yard touchdown and a hit where the ball goes haywire because you hit him early. Mike Hilton would have been there like 0.2 of a second earlier. It's just that he's that guy, There's not many of them.
Yeah. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, you live and you learn in the NFL, and it's just part of the business. But they face the former Steeler on Sunday. That's definitely going to be a fun one. I will be looking for Mike Hilton while they're on the field there and watching him probably closer than anyone else in the Bengals defense. But another name that's there, a new guy, Trey Hendrickson. He was the sack master for the Saints before he joined Cincinnati in the offseason, of course, replacing Carl Lawson, who, of course, himself went on to be a Jet and then get injured. What do you think of Hendrickson? Is he someone that could give the Steelers offensive line fits?
I don't know. I'm a little worried about him, but I think he was more a product. He was a bit of a product of the Saints defense. If I'm right, he was one of the like athletic freaks of the pass rushers of like the 2018 draft. He was like one of those crazy athletes. 2017, yeah, he was one of the guys up there with TJ Watt that were like, they're like, whoa, these guys have this crazy athleticism. I don't worry about him too much, but he is their most dangerous pass rusher. He's the guy you really have to look out for. But I'm not too worried about their pass rush.
So I had an article run out today on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com about offensive line play, and how the Steelers could try to improve their line not only this year but moving into the future. When you're done listening to this podcast, you can go ahead and read that. But I'm curious, Geoffrey, what are your thoughts? Can they fix this offensive line? Is this something that's possible in this season?
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for jumping into the like offensive line evaluation, because I know I've talked to you about that. I was like, come on, Mike, like get in there and jump in and give us some good tidbits here. So thank you for that. I read it. I'm going to read it again here. It's one of those articles. If they're good articles, I go back and read a couple times, so I actually remember what's in it. But to me, this offensive line, from the film side, watching the film, there's a lot of 1v1 breakdowns, right? We've got guys who are maybe solid on like 75% of their snaps, but they're like staggering who's screwing up. Like if you watch the film, you'll have a guy just get like Kendrick Green will get absolutely destroyed on a play. And the next play, Trey Turner will just not reach the guy he needs to get to. And then the next one, like a Okorafor, who's had a couple of good blocks in a row, comes up and just gets blown up and the whole play is dead. It just seems like we have a constant string of somebody's messing up, right? And yet when they put it together, like we saw a 14-yard run right up the middle where Najee Harris wasn't touched till he on a first down, a 2nd and 10, he ran for 14 yards. He wasn't touched till he made it past the first down marker because they actually just hit their blocks, which they're doing more often than not, but there's just too many errors, too many people. Some of it you can see there's still miscommunication going on. I don't know how much they can fix in a season. That's actually a question I wanted to ask you, since you're an offensive line coach. How much can you realistically hope for an individual offensive lineman to improve over the course of one season?
Well, I think to a degree, it's definitely possible. Older players like Trey Turner, I think what you see at this point is exactly what you're going to get. There is stuff that the Steelers coaches can do to make life easier for them, though. And that's something I kind of went in on in the article. Stuff like zone blocking. And for people that don't really know what that is, instead of trying to block people straight up and deciphering who's blitzing, who's stunting, and whose man becomes yours when those things happen, a zone block just means you block the area between your right hip and the left hip of the offensive lineman beside you, or vice versa. That way, it's just very simple. Whoever shows up there is yours. They can do stuff like that to make life easy, and they can just be football players. And that's really what I kind of talked about in the article. So I think to a degree, they can just simplify things. Obviously in the NFL, you don't want to do that too much because of how talented and how smart defensive coordinators are. And there's stuff you can do to beat that, like sending extra pressure, sending multiple guys to the same gap. There's stuff you can do to beat it. But at the end of the day, you can just play simple football and just put your players in the best position they possibly can, utilizing lots of cut blocks and extra chips and whatnot. Heck, I know Ben Roethlisberger took that nasty sack in 7-man protection against 4 guys rushing. That's simply not good enough. And obviously that's a lot of mistakes tied into that. So the Steelers are going to have to iron out a lot of the issues here. But sticking with
if I can jump in, there's a thing I want to ask you with this, because watching on film, right? I'm actually sorry. Go ahead. Forget this. My mind just went completely blank. I'm really sorry. I had this great question to ask you, and then it's gone. I'm sorry.
Hey, it's okay. We will still talk about offensive line play. So if it comes to you, by all means, fire it straight back at me. But at that right tackle spot, of course, Zach Banner is slowly getting back. I think the earliest he's allowed to be back in action would be next week against the Green Bay Packers. Do you think his addition alone could kind of reshape this offensive line in a way where you might find them being more successful on the field?
Yes, absolutely. I know we don't have a ton of film on Banner, but everything we have, like you go last year, his first play game in New York where he was his first start. You go to this season in the preseason, all of it is better than what we're seeing, frankly, from both tackles right now, from Okorafor or Dan Moore Jr. Both of them are getting beat on plays where you just saw Banner. I mean, when Zach Banner doesn't do it right, he's still this massive, person in space that you have to get around, right? Like if that's one of the things about Dan Moore Jr. that's helping him survive is even if he messes up, he can still shove a guy, right? He has long arms. He can reach out and shove a guy and get a little more than a smaller guy gets. Zach Banner is enormous. You're not going to see him get run over very often like we saw Okorafor get absolutely run over on a bull rush and stepped on his way to the quarterback. But I do remember what I was going to ask you. All right, because one of the things I talked about was when you're dealing with running the ball and you have one more guy in the box than you have blockers, right? And I was saying that if you nail all of your blocks, you can scheme. Most run schemes in those situations will take that one person. They'll say, okay, we're going to kind of leave this person free, and we're going to run a play that will kind of put them in traffic. They've got to run around some other defenders and stuff to kind of account for that 7th player. But one of the things we're seeing with the Steelers is a guy will mess up an assignment. One defender gets through. Najee Harris beats that defender, but that extra time allows the free man to get to him. And that allows, and it starts, it steamrolls because all of a sudden everyone has, a tenth of a second and then half a second, to get to the ball, and everyone does. Whereas if you see a play where you have even numbers in the box, even if someone screws up, right? If Najee Harris gets past that guy, you have a better chance for a gain. Does that check with you?
No, that absolutely makes sense. And sometimes there's some plays where you just don't have the numbers, and you scheme to be in situations where you'll have the numbers on your side. That's the reason why some plays are called in one direction versus another, depending if they're on the field or boundary. But sometimes you just don't have those numbers in your favor, and it's up the running back's job to make that extra guy miss. When people start falling off, like you said, then the play turns to what. So they, in those situations, yeah, absolutely. There's some play designs where, like I talked about in my article, running an outside zone play is designed to make the running back or the linebackers pursue. And then at the third step for the running back, their actual scheme is to cut back up inside and go against the grain. On an outside zone play, all of a sudden they're cutting it back inside because the linebackers have over pursued. So there is a lot of schemes where that's exactly the case. You just don't have the numbers with you, but the play design is still set up for the running backs to be in positions to either outrun or just try to make one man miss. That's just the way everything's kind of set up through the offensive line.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Past that, getting back into Sunday's action, what do you kind of like matchup-wise for the Steelers offense attacking the Bengals defense? Do you see any holes? Do you see any receivers or running backs or tight ends that are kind of destined for a big game here?
No. I've got a lot of questions myself for the offense. The big one is we've got to be able to throw deep and not just to the sidelines, right? We're not seeing a Ben Roethlisberger who trusts his arm to beat a free safety. And against the Bengals, one of the better single high safeties in the league in Jesse Bates. He is one of the top single high safeties in the NFL. Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think, is a better overall player, but I would put Bates ahead of Minkah Fitzpatrick if you're only doing like a cover one where you got one deep safety. Bates is better. He covers a lot of ground. He's very smart about how he moves. And we're facing that when at a time where the Steelers are being successfully defended by single high safeties because we're not seeing Ben Roethlisberger and these wide receivers beat the coverage deep reliably enough to make them consider putting two guys back there. And I brought this up because, man, that's what we used to always see from Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger was exactly that dude that if you put single high safety, especially against the Bengals used to do it to Martavis Bryant. They'd put a guy out in man on Martavis Bryant with just one safety deep, and Ben would absolutely destroy them throughout the game until they backed off a second safety to put multiple players deep. He always did that. That was one of his great strengths. That's why the pump fake was so dangerous and how he looked off safety was so dangerous. Because if you played single high safety and we had a deep threat on the outside, you were toast. Like you were just, if that wide receiver wins his release, you're done. And right now, the Steelers have one of the better deep threats they've had. I think the best deep threat in Chase Claypool they've had since Mike Wallace. And yet it's not working because you don't see Ben challenging the free safety at all right now. You see all of his throws out to the sideline, out like, hey, Chase, go, jump over a guy, including a pass this last game where, Chase Claypool had to jump over the cornerback because Ben threw to the leverage of the cornerback when there was no one in the middle. And you're just like, that's, is that one bad throw? Is that one bad read? But it's been 2 seasons of this. This is the second season of this. And you really have to start asking, like, hey, is this now Ben Roethlisberger? Is this 39-year-old Ben Roethlisberger? And is he not going to be able to carry a team that doesn't have an offensive line? Because if he can't do that, then the offensive line has to get it together, or this offense is going to be, right now the offense is awful. Our offense is kind of trash. And is it going to get better? That's like something, either the quarterback or the offensive line have to get drastically better than they have been recently. And That's a big question mark.
See, this is an important conversation that I think we need to continue here. We look at the Steelers' offense. They're 4 deep at receiver. I don't know how many teams can rival that. Their tight ends, I genuinely think they got a dude in Pat Freiermuth, and I still think Eric Ebron has his talents. Najee Harris is a really, really good running back prospect that, honestly, I feel like if you stuck him on the Browns, he'd be up there with the league leaders, behind any good offensive line, really. He looks all that, but he's just getting eaten alive by poor performances in front of him. You mentioned Ben Roethlisberger specifically. Could we be looking at what is kind of the end here for Big Ben? Is this trending in the wrong direction? Is there anything he can do, or is the hay in the barn really, and it's time to just kind of take the old horse around back?
Wow. Wow. Michael's taking it a little farther than me. I would just let him retire. I'm personally not for capital punishment for football. I'm sorry. I understand your analogy. I know. I'm messing with you. No, I think we're there. Like last season, Peyton Manning, we're not that bad with Ben. Ben is not what Peyton Manning was his very last season, where they won the Super Bowl in spite of him. But also this team, with that offensive line, like you said, we have a ton of skill position talent. We have a really young offensive line that right now, yeesh. It's like we've got a souped up sports car, but the offensive line is the engine, and the engine is unreliable, and the driver is a little old and is puttering around. It's not a performance car at this point because it doesn't have a great driver and it doesn't have a great engine. I think if the offensive line can get it together, this team can still be something. That's where we've been this whole season. Like I'm sticking with that. If this offensive line can get together and become a good offensive line before Ben Roethlisberger gets hurt, then this team can be something. If not, you're dealing with an offensive line that is not good enough and a quarterback that needs a good offensive line to be good. And I think he can still be great if he has that offensive line. I think at this point of his career, those hits hurt enough that they stick with him, and they carry from game to game. He's got a pec injury. He doesn't know when he got it. Like he's just, you're old. I'm sorry. Your body doesn't heal like it used to. You're going to be sore. Hits are going to wear, and they're just going to build up. The bangs and little problems are going to build up more than they used to. And so this very well could be it. We looked week 1 like we had a defense that could carry this team until that point. But then, you lose some players and it's not that defense anymore. It can't carry it. I don't know. We're in a really weird place where I'm looking at this Bengals game and I'm like, this could be the get right game for the Steelers because it's the Bengals, because it's another game at, Heinz Field. Oh, we could get a couple players back. We have their coach. I think we have him pretty much figured out, unless he changes things up. But again, Jamar Chase has added a new threat with the deep ball. I don't know where we are in this game. It has to be a get right game, or this season is in real trouble.
Now, we are approaching the first half-hour mark of our show here today. So before we get to our special guest on, I'm curious what your final score kind of thoughts are for the Steelers' second home game of the year against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh man, see, this is hard because I don't even know who's playing.
Yeah,
we don't know if we have a great defense or if we have a defense that's meh. I'll tell you what, if Joe Hayden doesn't play, we're losing this game. I'll go right there. If Hayden plays, I'll go Steelers 17, Bengals 16, just because I don't want this to be a loss. I really don't want this to be a loss.
Yeah, like if you told me a week ago all the injuries the Steelers would have had against the Raiders, I would have picked the Raiders then too. I was high on the Steelers before everyone got hurt, and obviously we saw that on the field. In this game, assuming everyone's healthy, I think it's going to be a dogfight again. I think it's going to be low scoring. I want to pick the Steelers, though, because they are at home coming off that brutal loss. And, of course, probably wanting a little bit of revenge after that terrible, ugly game against the Bengals the last time out. I'll go with Steelers 18, Cincinnati Bengals 13, 5-point difference there. Steelers victorious, but we will flip over to the second half of their show. When we come back, we'll be with James Rapien from the Locked On Bengals podcast. So if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook, just hang tight. If you are listening over on the podcast platforms, just click over to part 2 right now. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Know Your Enemy podcast. My name is Michael Beck, joined by Geoffrey, Benedict. Just waiting for James Rapien to jump online with us. James, of course, being from the Locked On Bengals podcast. So, Geoffrey, of course, so we got into it a bit in the first part of the show, talking about Ben Roethlisberger a lot. So why don't we flip things over to the young buck and Joe Burrow? Because I know you've watched him a little bit this far. Do you think he's going to be that guy that he was kind of projected to be when the Bengals took him first overall, of course, coming off that knee injury?
I think he's trending that direction. You're seeing him throw some interceptions this year, but a lot of that I think is just he's feeling more free to actually test himself and to test defenses, and he's giving. It's kind of the Ben Roethlisberger interceptions where he's going to give his guy a chance to make a play, and if it goes bad, he's going to shrug it off and do it again. And now he has, that receiver group, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. That's a good group of receivers. That's a lot of talent there. So I think he's trending that direction.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. Now, when we look at obviously this past offseason, kind of one of the topics about the Bengals that I know Steelers fans were liking to josh around about was the whole Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase theory. If you don't have an offensive line, how are you going to deliver the ball down the field? Have they made the right selection? I think you probably need a drink of your beverage before answering this one, but what are your thoughts on this?
I actually said it made sense from the start, because when you get a young quarterback, one of the most valuable things is a guy who lets him erase mistakes and a guy he can bail the ball, just bail out to. I always give the example of Plexico Burress was that guy for rookie Ben Roethlisberger, and then the New York Giants signed him to a big deal to go be that guy for Eli Manning, and he was. And that just really boosts your ability. Like we see people talk about with Zach Wilson in the New York Jets, where he's testing himself. He's throwing balls that maybe he shouldn't, and he's finding out, can I beat this coverage with this shot? I can, or no, I can't. He's finding that out. And I think we're seeing that from Joe Burrow, and a big part of that is the guys he has.
Awesome. Now, with that, we will welcome in James Rapien from the Locked On Bengals podcast. James, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well, fellas. How are you guys?
We're doing quite well. Now, first, before we ask you about the Bengals, I got to ask you about the Bearcats helmet behind you there. Desmond Ridder, how's he looking this year? I know a lot of Steelers fans got their eyes on him as a potential heir to the Roethlisberger throne.
Well, man, you want to break a lot of people in Cincinnati's heart. If Desmond Ridder ends up in Pittsburgh, my Lord. But this season, that would be tough. Look at you just painting this picture for Bearcats and Bengals fans. Anyways, no, he looks really good, and the Bearcats are playing well. They're on a bye this week, but he entered the season as a dark horse Heisman candidate, and right now I don't think he's on that level, but they're undefeated, and when they play Notre Dame next week, if he has a huge game in South Bend, then maybe he can sneak onto the Heisman radar. So no, I think he's playing well, and certainly a guy that if he doesn't go first round, because some people say he's a sneaky first round type guy, I think he could end up being a day 2 pick for sure.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and we'll get off the college talk quickly here, but both Notre Dame and the Bearcats are top 10 of the top 25 right now?
I believe Notre Dame might be 12th, but
okay.
The Bearcats are 8th last I checked. And ultimately, I obviously you see the helmet. I'm a Bearcat through and through. And that being said, I don't really care about the rankings. If they can't get past Notre Dame, then it doesn't really matter. So hopefully they can hand Brian Kelly an L 11 years after he left the program. That'd be pretty cool.
There you go.
Memories.
That's right.
So to get into Sunday's matchup here, what's kind of the general vibe kind of within Cincinnati, looking at the Steelers? Is it kind of like, oh, this is a team ripe for the picking now? We can jump on it and kind of dethrone them as kind of that AFC North kind of middling to top team. Is that kind of the vibe, or is it still we have to get past these guys before we can declare anything?
Yeah, I think this offseason there was a lot of talk about, the Steelers, they're limping into the offseason and they have offensive line issues too. And Ben Roethlisberger's old and he can only throw it 2.5 yards. There's a lot of that. But for me, no, I think that the Bengals have to prove it. And it would be one thing, I guess, if they had went into Chicago and beat up on Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. They didn't do that. It's a game I thought they should have won before it. I thought it was one of those games that prove that you're different after a big win against Minnesota in week 1, and they didn't. They came out flat on offense and obviously really made the score look closer than it was because they got beat on both sides of the ball for most of the game, I thought, overall at least, even though the defense played pretty well. So as far as the Steelers are concerned, yeah, this is a huge game for the Bengals, more of a prove-it game than last week, I guess, since the history between the two teams. And it's going to be a crazier environment. I know I'm going to be in Pittsburgh for the game, and I was looking at hotels earlier this week, and man, I mean, you're talking, half a K to stay in Pittsburgh. I had to find different lodging. I'm not staying in a hotel. So I think Steelers fans will be up there, be packed, and it should be a pretty fun environment.
Well, hopefully it's not a rental car.
Oh, no, I'm not staying in a rental car. A little Airbnb apartment action. It was just it's better. I don't need 2 bedrooms, right? My wife and I only need the one, but we'll be good. We'll have the other room for whatever, to watch TV or whatever.
Perfect. Go ahead, Geoffrey.
Yeah, with the Bengals, we're talking about the Bengals kind of arriving on the scene here again.
Mm-hmm.
How much faith do you have in Zach Taylor? I know he took over when Marvin Lewis was kind of in one of his down stretches. But he has not had really a good season at all. What have you seen in him, and what do you think of Zach Taylor so far as a head coach?
Yeah, I mean, 7-26-1 is what I see, and that whether it's fair or not, and I know there's some reasons behind that, and not just excuses. There are reasons why he struggled some. It was an older roster that he inherited, but the bottom line is when you win 7 games in 2 years and 2 games, that's what you get. And, I think some Bengals fans, as of now, I'm leaning Pittsburgh this week, and some Bengals fans might get on me for that. But look, Zach Taylor's 115-1 on the road. Like, that's insane. And that's what we're talking about on the road. So you expect me to pick against Mike Tomlin, who's never had a losing season, the Steelers, who haven't lost at home to the Bengals since 2015. Oh, and by the way, you just lost to Andy Dalton, Justin Fields, and the Bears on the road last week. So, there's a lot that the Bengals have to prove, and it does. It starts with Zach Taylor, because I think they have it right at quarterback. I think they have some really, really good weapons. Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, maybe. We'll see, right? He's dinged up right now. But Tyler Boyd, certainly. I can't believe I'm on a Pittsburgh podcast and I waited that long. Boyd, I think, is the best of the receivers, to be honest with you, at this stage of his career.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that they, especially offensively, like, it's one thing if the Bengals were, lost last week and put up 30. They had 3 points with 5 minutes to go in the game. That can't happen on Sunday. I mean, they better be much closer to that 30 number than that 3 number that they were when we're going down the stretch in the fourth quarter on Heinz Field on Sunday.
Wow, it sounds like things we're saying about the Steelers right now.
Yeah, offense up there hasn't looked much better. That's for sure.
Yeah, could be a low scoring affair, I assume, on Sunday, but hopefully a little bit more entertaining.
Maybe a Pirates Reds type score. I don't know.
1-0. That's my prediction. 1-0.
A root for playing Canadian football. We'll get that 1 point in. But anywho, so. Kind of one of the things that kind of dominated around the draft talk, of course, with the Bengals was whether or not they take Joe Burrow's buddy and Jamar Chase, or if they take the big time O tackle out of Oregon in Penei Sewell. Of course, they take Chase. How's that kind of worked out so far? Has the O-line been able to stick together? Of course, I believe Jackson Carman out of Clemson was the tackle they went with in the second round. So they ended up getting their offense line. But has it worked out the right way, or is Jamar Chase doing enough to kind of prove that they made the right pick?
I think so. And unfortunately, Burrow's taken a ton of hits over the first 2 weeks, so it's easy to point to the offensive line. But some of those hits aren't offensive line based. Joe Mixon missed a couple of blocks that got Joe just pummeled and crushed. A receiver didn't stop for a screen. So there have been protection issues, not necessarily just offensive line issues. And the tackles have been good in Jonah Williams and Riley Reif. So I think that that's part of it too. When you talk about it, like Jackson Carman, for example, he was a tackle at Clemson. And part of the reason he didn't start the year is because he's trying to get used to life at right guard, which if they had taken Penei Sewell, that might have been his destination. And I said that before the draft, that he might end up playing guard if they draft him 5th overall as a rookie. And people laughed at me, but I think that's what would have happened. And ultimately they thought Jamar was the better pick. And so far it looks like that. Now, he had some drop issues in preseason and in training camp and rookie mini camp. And I wrote about it and covered it. And then the lights came on, games mattered, and the dude's been balling out. He set a rookie record for the most receiving yards in a debut, 101 yards, 5 receptions and a touchdown against the Vikings. And then he was open a ton on last Sunday against the Bears. And, for one reason or another, he only had 2 receptions, wasn't targeted a lot, but had a 42-yard touchdown. So back-to-back games with a touchdown. And I think he's going to be the number 1 receiver on this team. I mean, he's 21 years old. He's putting up those numbers, and he hadn't played a game up until week 1, a game that mattered, since January, I believe it was 13th, 2020 against Clemson, that national championship game. So I think Jamar is going to be a damn good receiver, and he's an instant threat. And I don't think the Bengals regret that at all. Where I was critical of them, because I like the idea of bringing in a young receiver like that can grow with Joe Burrow alongside Higgins and Boyd. They probably should have spent more money on the offensive line in free agency, because Joe Burrow's been sacked 9 times. He's been hit 16 times in 2 games. That's insane. Like 9 sacks, that's the second most in the league. And we all knew that they needed to address it. And right now, they have not done a good enough job to protect him. And maybe part of that is on Joe, right? He's not as mobile as he was pre-ACL as he comes back from that injury. But I think there's, a lot to point at when it comes to that offensive line. And they need to button it up, all these protection issues, if they're going to get out of Heinz Field with a win on Sunday.
Talking about Jamar Chase. Now, the Bengals have had some serious receiver talent in the last 20 years, especially with like Chad Johnson and AJ Green. Do you think Jamar Chase is going to be at their level? And if, is it going to be a few years, or do you think has a chance to be that kind of player this year?
I think he can be what AJ Green was as a rookie and then some now. And not that he's better than AJ was as a rookie, but like numbers wise, because of the opportunities, because of the quarterback he has, because of the offense and the way the game is. Like AJ as a rookie was probably more ready for the NFL just because he had been seasoned at Georgia. He wasn't coming off of a year plus layoff and in everything that goes in with that. That being said, Jamar is different than Green, but it just seems like when the lights come on, he's ready to go, and it's, we'll see this week. He's going to go for a Bengals record. So he's tied with Green, the only 2 receivers in Bengals history to have touchdown catches in their first 2 games are Green and Jamar Chase. And so if Chase can get a 3rd straight, he'll snap Green's record. So no, I think expectations are that high. And I think that he can top, the 1,000-yard mark, so to speak, especially with the 17th game. But, will that production lead to wins? You certainly hope so. And that's something that we need to see, because as good as Chad Johnson was, and he was my, favorite Bengal player, maybe my favorite Bengal player ever. And he's just brought so much excitement to the city. I don't remember him dominating Pittsburgh much. I remember TJ Hushmanzada more than Chad, because I think they doubled him. And we'll see, if that happens, or if Chase rather can be more effective in a rivalry type game like this one.
Now, talking about players specifically in this matchup, I think someone Steeler fans definitely miss a whole heck of a lot is Mike Hilton. Can you break down what he's kind of meant to the Bengals so far, and whether or not you think he might have a big game against his former team?
Yeah, he's meant a ton. Instant impact right away in the secondary, in that defensive backs room, and with the safeties. One thing that he did, and he said he stole it from Joe Hayden, is he had a loaf jar, and he created this loaf system where, if you're caught loafing early in camp during practices, you got to put money in the jar. And at the end, it was a way to hold everybody accountable. And at the end, no one was putting money in the jar because they were tired of putting money in the jar. And he said he stole that from Joe Hayden in Pittsburgh, and it was kind of cool that he brought that over, and they all went out to eat afterwards. And that's been one of the more surprising units, I think, is the secondary. For all the new faces that they've brought in, and Trey Wayne still hasn't played a game, but Mike Hilton has certainly been a reliable nickel corner, adding pressure. You guys know firsthand how he is as a blitzer, definitely a quality tackler. And then Chidobe Awuzie, who they added, it's been a nice 1-2 combo. So we'll see if Trey Waynes can go this week. I don't think so. I think it's going to be another week. But when he comes back, I think the Bengals could have an above-average secondary, and Mike Hilton's a huge part of that from a leadership standpoint, and obviously on the field guarding opposing slot corners.
Yeah, Mike Hilton. You mentioned Mike Hilton and Chidobe Awuzie. The Bengals retooled their defense a lot. Like I was looking through the roster, I was like, wait, that guy's a Bengal? Wait, these people are Bengals? How has this drastically different defense, personnel-wise, looked? And is it still the same defensive scheme we've seen? Or should we be looking for a different style of defense too?
No, it's that 3-4 style that you've seen. I just think that the pieces fit better. And to answer kind of that first part of your question, I think they've exceeded expectations. They really have. And you're right. They've invested a ton of money on defense, so much so that people like me, I think, have questioned why they haven't invested more in the offensive line with their resources. That being said, this defensive line looks much improved, specifically the interior of this defensive line. DJ Reader has been a beast, and he only played 5 games last year due to a quad injury, and he looks just as good as he's ever looked, to be quite honest, the first couple games of the year, and he looked really good in limited reps in the preseason. But then they went out and they got Larry Ogunjobi from the Browns. They went out and got multiple different proven defensive tackles, traded for B.J. Hill from the Giants, and he had 2 sacks in week 1. I think that the interior of this defensive line is where they're going to try to make their hay, not only pressuring opposing quarterbacks, obviously slowing down a guy like Najee Harris on Sunday. And for 2 weeks at least, the retooling of this defense has paid off, and they look like they're going to be much improved from what we've seen over the past couple of years.
Now, speaking of that defense, they could have a pretty big game getting after Ben Roethlisberger. Of course, just calling a spade, the Steelers' offensive line has struggled, to say the least, through 2 weeks this far. Do you kind of anticipate that Ben Roethlisberger could be in for another beating against this Bengals front?
I think that's certainly the plan for the Bengals, right? And it's to me, it's going to be much easier said than done because we've seen it for a decade and a half now of Ben, being hurt, being dinged up, and then he's going to go out and throw for 4 touchdowns, right? And that's what happens against the Bengals. Yeah. That being said, totally. I think they can get after him. I mean, DJ Reader had a sack last week. Larry Ogunjobi was extremely disruptive, had multiple pressures, and disrupted who were they handing it off to? I forget what running back he took down last week. Either way, it was in the back. I believe it was the Montgomery kid, but it might have been the backup there. Either way. Totally. And then Larry Ogunjobi, and then BJ Hill, like I mentioned, had 2 sacks week 1. Ogunjobi had a sack week 1. So the up the middle pressure, certainly. And then another guy to keep an eye on off the edge, Trey Hendrickson, that they paid him big money this offseason. He nearly had multiple strip sacks over the past couple of weeks, and it's just been this close. And he's played well. He's gotten some pressure off the edge, and they're banking on him to do that. And, we'll see if they have enough juice on the edge. If there's one question mark when it comes to this defense, specifically the pass rush, it's that, because they lost Joseph Osai, the 3rd round pick out of Texas. They lost him in the preseason. And he was kind of going to help replace Carl Lawson a bit while you have Trey Hendrickson and you have Sam Hubbard and you have these guys off the edge. And now he's not there. And so without him, I think it was already kind of shallow and questionable as it is. Now they're really banking on Hendrickson to have an impact.
Steelers fans saw in week 2, TJ Watt started the game hot. The Raiders offense was struggling. And then when he went out, all of a sudden Derek Carr was able to step up in the pocket, throw downfield, and our defense started struggling. If TJ Watt plays against the Bengals, who is he facing? And how much of a problem do you think the Bengals will have dealing with him?
Well, do you think are they going to move him around both sides, or are they going to move him on the left and right side?
He's primarily on the left, facing the right tackle.
Gotcha. So then, it'll be Riley Reef. I just didn't know, especially with the groin, if they would move him at all. So I mean, he'll be dealing with Riley Reef, and Reef saw Khalil Mack in one-on-one situations last week, handled himself pretty well. And so, I think initially, based on what I've seen, and they haven't faced someone like TJ Watt, I think Watt is on another level, even than maybe Mack right now, depending on the groin, of course. But that being said, we've seen Reef on an island against opposing pass rushers. The same thing with Jonah Williams, the left tackle. So they'll probably try it there and then maybe give Reef some help on certain downs, certain packages and formations, depending on the situation. That being said, they better be prepared if Watt is wrecking the game like he did early against Vegas last week. All right, we got to abandon this, because there's no way Bengals fans or the Bengals or anybody wants to see TJ Watt all up in Joe Burrow's grill, starting from the first kickoff. I know people in Pittsburgh do, and Steelers fans across the country, but man, that's what nightmares are made of in Cincinnati. So they got to have a backup plan, because I don't know about you guys. I think Watt's going to play. The fact that he was limited today, I think bodes really well for his chances of being out there. And if he's out there, that's scary, because he's just one play away from, strip sack, fumble, returning it for a touchdown. The Bengals know all about TJ Watt, and it hasn't been fun for them facing him.
I'm just thinking about Riley Reef going back to back on Khalil Mack and then TJ Watt. That's a murderer's row. Who does he have the week after? I'm hoping a lesser matchup.
Yeah, well, it's Jacksonville, so yeah.
Okay.
4 days later,
he gets a rest. Take that one off.
I mean, Kaylavon Chason, I guess. Joe Burrow's former teammate from LSU. I don't know who else. I would have to study. There's been so much turnover in Jacksonville. Yeah, that's right.
Speaking of Joe Burrow, though, how's his knee holding up so far? Has he been limited at all, or is he back to his regular self?
I wouldn't say limited, no. But is he making, is he the same playmaker that he was a year ago at this time? I also would say no. And I think part of it is he just needs game reps. And I asked him that today, and he was like, I just need more game reps to feel more comfortable making those plays. And to me, it's not even comfort, like him thinking like, oh, I'm not comfortable. It's instinct. And sometimes it takes reps. That's why I would have played him in the preseason. Though, honestly, I would have played him multiple series in that final preseason game. I might have played him, the week prior, the preseason opener for a series or two, just so now when things are going, you're not going through this process as much. And it is always a process, but, you can't go back on that. So, ready or not, try to dodge TJ Watt. It's just tough. So it's going to be one of those things where hopefully the Bengals have a game plan for their sake and for Burrow's sake, where he can get into a rhythm early, because that's going to be such a key, I think, especially on the road in Pittsburgh, team coming off of a loss. That crowd is going to be hungry, and they're going to want to see a win, and they're going to want to see Burrow on the ground more than he's on his 2 feet. So that can snowball. We saw it last year. It was probably Burrow's worst game, certainly his second worst game. It was against the Steelers. He doesn't look like that normally. Even these past couple of weeks when they're 1-on-1, he hasn't struggled like that much. So we'll see if he can kind of redeem himself from the struggles that he had last year at Heinz Field.
Ready or not, get ready for TJ. Did you pull that out a newspaper? I'm hoping.
No, man. I just made it up on the fly. You guys can print the T-shirts though. That's pretty good. I might have to trademark it.
So some royalties going back.
You're going to see me on Sunday morning. I have a press credential right here, and I'm going to have a vendor's license with a bunch of shirts, and It'll be kind of funny. Huh?
That's just good business. That's good
right.
business.
Ready or not.
Jeffrey, go ahead.
All right. Where would you rank Joe Burrow right now against the other AFC North quarterbacks? And where do you think he'll end up in the end of the season? Do you think it'll change at all by the end of this year?
All right, I'll rank him. Lamar Jackson's the best quarterback in the division. Everyone's going to get mad at me, but he is. He's the biggest threat. 2, man, it's tough. 2, God, you guys are going to really crush me because you know where Ben is.
You can.
No, it's okay. I have Ben 4. I think I would take Joe Burrow over Baker Mayfield, but right now Baker Mayfield's playing better than Joe Burrow, and he did last year because he's not coming off of a knee. So I'd probably put Baker 2, Burrow 3. But if I'm drafting them, I'm taking Burrow over Baker, if that makes sense. And then I put Ben 4. And look, it's a really good division, and I think all of them are capable. And Ben could outplay Joe on Sunday, and I would not be shocked at all. But, you know, if I had to rank them, I'd probably go Lamar, Baker, Burrow, Ben.
Yeah, totally fair on that. I think that's probably how most people would see it too. Especially if you're drafting. I don't think anyone's taking the going on 39-year-old QB unless he already is 39. But what do you kind of foresee for the Bengals to take kind of advantage of the Steelers defense? Where will they kind of try to move the ball?
Well, they certainly need to, assuming they can keep Burrow clean. I think they know they need to put the ball in his hands and try to push the ball down the field a bit more. Last week against Chicago, the Chicago secondary, the Bears were just sitting on every route, and the Bengals went empty, and they were trying to do the quick game, and it just did not work. And that's why Burrow had those 2 quick picks, and he had a third, but it wasn't his fault. His arm got hit, and the ball popped up in there. It was more a fumble than an interception. But yeah, those 2 picks, they were just sitting on the routes, and so to me, I would totally try to get the ball down the field. Now it's easier said than done when you got a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick roaming around, and he's such a playmaker and he's good at disguising things. But get the ball to your playmakers. And this is where it goes back to Zach Taylor. And you guys asked me about him, 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago. He's an offensive mind. And if Sean McVay were coaching the Bengals, would anyone question his ability to get the ball to Jamar Chase or Joe Burrow or Joe Mixon, in space? Like Jamar Chase in space, it rhymes again, right? Ready or not, TJ Watt. Like that would happen all the time. And that's something that Zach should be able to do if he's this creative, innovative offensive mind that the Bengals hired him because of, right? And even if he's going up against the defensive coach like Mike Tomlin and the Steelers defense with Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt, it doesn't matter. You got to find ways to make plays. That's why you drafted Jamar Chase. And so I want to see that. I want to see these guys in space. Get Mixon in a spot where he's going to have a couple steps on a defender or on a linebacker, if he's going up, against whoever, to be honest with you. And that's going to be the key. And Boyd's another one, right? But can they get these playmakers in space? And if so, then they should be able to put up points because they're extremely talented in this 17 points. And even the week 1 against Minnesota, 27 points. That's basically 5 quarters of football. And I expect more out of this offense, and I think they expect more. And it's not going to be easy on Sunday, but that's got to be the key is to score and try to get close to that 30-point mark.
Geoffrey, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I got one last question. I got to ask you from the Bengals side, is this a rivalry game, or was it just, we had 2 teams that were constantly butting heads and those teams were rivals? Or do you think this is this rivalry survived the changing of teams, or is this not even really a rivalry anymore?
I think it's a rivalry to a degree, but I don't think that there's the hatred that was there for some of them. Bengals fans got it cracked up about Von Bell cracking juju, right? And that that's something that comes out. So I think there's certainly hate there, but it's not like, oh my gosh, Hines Ward's on the other side, or I can't believe that Vontaze Burfict is playing in this game, or, we can go on and on and on, right? I don't know if that's there, but is it still a rivalry? I do. I think it's a rivalry. And part of it, honestly, now is the other 2 teams in this division on paper are better than you. And they are, they're more talented. The Ravens and the Browns are more talented than the Steelers and the Bengals on paper. So that's part of why it needs to be a rivalry game, because both teams need this win as they try to hold serve in the AFC North and keep up the pace.
Awesome. Now, before we let you go, two quick final questions for you, James. Sure. Firstly, with the amount of rhymes tonight, I got to ask, were you a poetry major, or is this purely coincidence?
Coincidence. I will admit, though, the chase in space I've said before, and it, I really will, get those shirts rolling. I don't know if my shirt guy's going to be able to get the ready or not, here comes TJ Watt. And maybe that is already trademarked. Does no one in Houston, has no one done that for JJ Watt? Ready or not, JJ Watt? Like, you should still have that. So, no poetry major, but, maybe I'll start writing a little bit.
All right. Last thing for you, too. I know you mentioned you're picking the Steelers. Did you have a final score prediction in mind?
Not really. I mean, I've thought about the game, obviously, the past couple of days, and that's where I'm leaning today. Maybe it'll change. Maybe these injuries will change things. But if I had to make one right now, I think it's going to be like 24-17. Like, I think it'll be a one-score game, maybe 24-20, 23-20, like in that range where it's a one-score game. The Bengals are in it, but, it's one of those weird AFC North games where most people know that what's going to happen. And, maybe Burrow has the ball late and TJ Watt comes around the corner and gets the sack or the strip fumble or something like that. But, that's the way I'm leaning, because until Zach Taylor proves he can go on the road and win and go on the road and beat a guy like Mike Tomlin, then why would I buy that he can do that? And that's kind of where I fall back to, because I think the teams from a talent standpoint are pretty close when you compare them.
Awesome. Now, last thing before we let you out of here, is there anything you want to plug?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll be in Pittsburgh, this weekend covering the game for allbengals.com. So I'll have a ton there, and it's not just Bengals that'll be covering it, all Steelers too, because, obviously it's a huge game and it's a rivalry game, and, hopefully it's a good one. I don't want to go to Pittsburgh. It's only a 4-hour drive. I don't want to go there and see a blowout. I want to see a good game where I'm entertained. And then when I go do that post-game stand-up, I can, have some excitement and not, it was 56-3 today. It was brutal. And, I don't want that. So hopefully it's a close game.
Totally understood. James Rapien, thank you so much for your time. You're free to go as Geoffrey and I sign out. So thank you so much again. It was greatly appreciated.
Of course, guys. I appreciate you having me.
No, our pleasure, man. As always. Geoffrey, I guess I'll turn it over to you as well. Is there anything you want to plug before we say goodbye to the people?
I want to plug, I just want to say, ready or not, TJ Watt is that's going to be a shirt on the South Side. You just got to get him doing his kick celebration, like the outline of that, kicking a door in. Just be like, ready or not, TJ Watt, boom, kick the door in.
Maybe that's what it'll be for Halloween.
That's got to be a t-shirt on the South Side already. In the strip district. There's got to be a t-shirt in the strip district already right now. Someone's already making it right now. I've got a film room. Couple things coming out. My podcast on Tuesday was all about, it's called The Cutting Room Floor. That covered a lot. If you want to hear my thoughts on Ben Roethlisberger and that situation, a little more expounded, that came out on Tuesday. It's an audio-only podcast. If you want to see my thoughts on the offensive line, I just submitted a film room today. It's probably going to go tomorrow or Friday, one of the two, on the offensive line and the run game and what's going on there. And Dave Schofield and I just did a vertex on the difference on our defense between when TJ Watt was in and when TJ Watt was out of the game. Incredible difference. So check all of that out.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Geoffrey. I also want to remind the people of the offensive line article that I had run today, about 1,100 words. If anything, you'll learn a little bit about offensive line play. If it's confusing, you can always shoot me a message on Twitter or whatnot at MichaelBeck56. You can follow Geoffrey as well at FantaSkippy. That's PH Fanta. You can find him there. Before we sign out, I guess we should also remind you to click over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. It should be your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. And finally, make sure if you're only listening to these shows on YouTube or Facebook, you're only getting about a quarter of the podcasts we're putting out. There are 25 original titles now on our audio platforms. seriously, there is a ton of great Pittsburgh Steelers content available to you from a variety of hosts, including Geoffrey, Benedict, myself, Geoff Hartman, Dave Schofield, the boys from Australia. You name it, there is a ton of content. And shout out Brian Anthony Davis for producing all of it. So thank you once again for tuning in to Know Your Enemy tonight. For my co-host, Geoffrey Benedict, my name is Michael Beck. Thank you for tuning in.